Hello, my friends. I've lost a lot of viewers lately because of the things I've been posting, but I'm going to double down here because what the heck? I want to tell you a story. So, when I was around the age of 10, I wanted to dress like a boy, and I went by a boy's name. My name's Mika, and so I started to want to be called Mikey, and I started to make little guy friends. And my mom let me cut my hair short, and she let me buy some boy clothes, not because she thought I was a boy, but she was letting me express myself, which I think is important. I think it's important to let kids express themselves, otherwise they feel oppressed and like something's wrong with them, and kids are kids and they explore. And so she let me go through this time in my young life. And of course, this was a long time ago not that long, okay? But it was long enough ago that it was before things were as liberal and accepting as they are now. And after a while, I kind of grew out of that. I've always been a tomboy, always. I've always liked to do boyish things. Even as a kid, I liked to play with cars. I still played with dolls, but I played with cars and did boy things and climbing trees and now I still do boyish things. I fish, I'm getting into hunting, that kind of thing. That's just part of who I am. And I can't help but think about often, if I was a child nowadays, how would my behaviors be received that I had then? So before I get into this, I'm going to make this as brief as I can. So when I grew up, I came out of the closet and lived as initially a bisexual person. And then eventually in my late 20s, early 30s, I came out as a non-binary pansexual person. And I was deeply involved in the LGBTQ community. I even had a provincial seat on a national diversity and inclusion committee, which actually helped draft legislation for diversity and inclusion and queer rights in Canada. All right, that's no small potatoes. I'll just put it out there. I was in pride parades. I used to date a transgender celebrity. I was in it as about as much as one can be. And when I got involved in this committee, which had a lot of transgender people on it, I started to think about my past as that child, being boyish and wanting to kind of be like a boy for a while. And I started to question whether I was actually a female or not. And with adamant support from my peers, my coworkers and friends, I started to think about that seriously. I did question my gender as to whether I was male. I ultimately decided I was not a male, but I was neither, so I identified as non-binary for quite a few years. And over that time, I had a powerful experience with Jesus Christ. Now, stick with me here. I know I'm going to lose some of you at this, and I'm not going to turn this into a preaching thing, I promise. I just want to show you where I'm coming from. But my heart was changed. And this wasn't a psychological thing. This is a matter of the heart. And I realized, you know what? I am a female. And I was so confused before. And I'm not just talking about confusion about the genders. I just felt confused all the time. And maybe some of you can relate to this who have gone through this. I just felt confused. I was like, am I a lesbian? Am I pansexual? Am I bisexual? Am I a man, a woman? Am I non-binary? Am I one of these other pronouns? And it just seemed like so much was out there for trying to figure myself out, so many options, and I just didn't know what to do. And so I went through a few different pronouns and identity things, and it was so confusing during that time, not just with those pronouns and things, but just in my life. Everything felt so confusing. And then when I came to God, everything just felt centered within me, and it wasn't from anything anyone was telling me or anything. God literally just changed my heart, and I found identity with him. And I guess my point of this is kids go through phases and experiences, okay? We all explore ourselves. We all explore different aspects of ourselves, including the masculine and feminine, right? We all have both of those hormones. We have masculine and feminine hormones. And I think it's natural to explore that and perhaps not totally stifle that as a child, you know. But if your kid or yourself, if you're a young person, are exhibiting some of these tendencies or feelings, it doesn't necessarily mean you're the wrong gender or the opposite gender, you know. And I've known and talked and seen so many people that transitioned when they were young, and they are devastated now, and many of them have committed suicide, right? We talk about how there is a high suicide rate among trans kids. Well, I think a lot of that is in part to a lot of these kids being perhaps overly supported in their supposed transition. And then when they grow up and their hormones balance out and they start to be able to think more clearly for themselves, they realize, like, no, actually, I am the biological sex that I was born with. And how devastating would that be to actually have that problem in the realest sense of being confused when you were young and then transitioning or beginning to transition. And then when you realize you are actually the gender you are born with, by now you might have been sterilized, which, you know, a lot of the drugs that they give kids to block puberty blockers, they are actually like the same drugs that they give for chemical castration. A lot of these children grow up to be non-fertile, which is crazy. A lot of people I've talked to have not been disclosed all of the information that they needed to about the dangers about these drugs. And of course that includes their parents, you know. And of course, you know, being a liberal is much more trendy than being a Democrat. And this is not something to jump on the bandwagon with, my friends. This is something that can and will affect your child's life forever. So when I was a kid going through all that, can you imagine if my parents were either supportive or non-supportive? If they were supportive of gender ideology, I could have been early transitioned. And then when I grew up, realized, no, I am actually a female. But by that time, my voice would have dropped. I wouldn't have developed breasts. Maybe I would have had a top surgery and had my breasts removed. Possibly even bottom surgery, and had a huge amount of muscle and skin cut from the inner part of my arm to make a false penis. Would that not make you suicidal? I just want people to think about seriously what they're doing with their children, right? When you're a grown adult, you make up your own mind whatever you want to do. I'm not going to tell you that's right or wrong. That's up to you. It's between you and God. But when it involves your children who aren't even old enough to buy alcohol or cigarettes, which might have long-term effects, or at least short-term effects, but they're not even allowed to do those things. You can't buy a lottery ticket. They can't vote. But you can go and get parts of your body cut off and hormones that could destroy your fertility forever, make you have a changed voice and grow facial hair or the opposite. This is serious stuff. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you. Ask Him to guide you. Truly, just pray to God and ask Him to guide you in whatever decisions you're making. He loves you regardless of what you're doing or what you've done. Bye-bye.